Chapter 3. Sparks and Shadows. The Eastern Archives existed in a strange liminal space, technically part of the Fire Guild complex, yet constructed to exist half a level below the main foundation, partially embedded in the volcanic stone beneath Pyreholm. This arrangement protected the precious documents from both external attack and the occasional magical disasters that plagued institutions where young mages learned to control their abilities. Unlike the bright, warm spaces typical of fire architecture, the archives maintained a cool, dry atmosphere with minimal light sources, conditions ideal for preserving ancient texts, but somewhat disorienting for those accustomed to the guild's usual environments. Magical lanterns activated as Lyra and Cassius descended the narrow staircase, casting pools of amber light that illuminated just enough of their surroundings to navigate safely while protecting the collection from prolonged light exposure.
"The sealed section is this way,"
Lyra said, leading Cassius past tall shelves of meticulously organized records.
"It hasn't been accessed in decades, according to the library registry."
Yet you seem familiar with the layout,
Cassius observed, his violet eyes reflecting the amber lantern light as he glanced at her. Lyra allowed herself a small smile.
"Let's just say my research interests occasionally extend beyond officially sanctioned areas."
a habit we appear to share.
He replied with a matching expression. The spirit shield he'd helped create was making it easier for Lyra to focus on their conversation, rather than fighting the necklace's distracting influence. Though she could still feel its warmth against her skin, her thoughts remained clear and centered. They reached a section cordoned off by an ornate ironwork gate, embellished with the Fire Guild seal. Unlike most barriers in the complex, this one bore no obvious locking mechanism. No keyhole, no handle, not even a visible hinge.
"Ancestral recognition ward,"
Lyra explained, noting Cassius's interest in the unusual gate.
"It responds only to those with Fire Guild bloodlines that were present during the separation era."
Clever security,
He commented.
though I suspect you found a workaround for your unauthorized visits.
"Not exactly,"
She admitted.
"The Embersong line was among the founding families. The gate recognizes me naturally."
She placed her palm flat against the guild seal at the gate's center, feeling the ancient magic stir in response to her touch. The metal warmed beneath her hand, then began to glow faintly from within, tracing patterns that matched the flow of her magical signature. With a sound like a distant sigh, the gate dissolved into embers that swirled briefly around them before dispersing into the air.
Impressive.
Cassius murmured, watching the last sparks fade.
Most Spirit Guild protections employ similar lineage verification, but with considerably more dramatic manifestations.
"Ancestral spirits physically manifesting to challenge intruders."
Lyra hazarded a guess as they stepped into the sealed section.
Something like that.
He confirmed with a wry smile.
We do have a certain reputation for theatricality to maintain.
His self-deprecating humor surprised a genuine laugh from her, a sound that felt almost foreign after days of tension and forced pleasantries. The necklace pulsed once against her throat, as if objecting to her unguarded moment of connection with Cassius, but the shield held, keeping her thoughts clear. The sealed section was smaller than she'd expected, a circular chamber with a central table surrounded by shelves that hugged the curved walls. Unlike the main archives, which organized materials by chronology and subject, this section appeared arranged by family lineages, with each shelf bearing the insignia of a founding Fire Guild house.
These aren't just historical records.
Cassius said, his voice hushed as he took in the chamber's contents.
They're family grimoires, personal accounts.
"The official histories maintain that guild separation was a natural consequence of elemental incompatibility."
Lyra moved toward the shelf bearing the Embersong phoenix.
"But if that were true, why seal away the first-hand accounts? Why create a chamber that only founding lineages can access?"
A question that spans all 5 guilds.
Cassius agreed, following her to the Embersong section.
The Spirit Guild has similar restricted archives, though ours are guarded by actual ancestors rather than magical gates.
Lyra carefully lifted a slim volume bound in what appeared to be dragon skin, a material extinct for centuries, known for its remarkable ability to preserve magical energies within written texts. The book's cover bore the Embersong phoenix in faded gold, with dates corresponding to the early separation period.
My ancestor's personal journal,
She explained, handling it with reverence as she placed it on the central table.
Lyra Embersong was among the first High Councilors of the newly formed Fire Guild.
As she opened the journal, the pages emitted a faint scent of smoke and spice, signature fragrances embedded in the text to verify authenticity to those with the proper bloodline. Lyra inhaled deeply, feeling a subtle connection to the ancestor whose words she was about to read. Cassius remained respectfully silent, standing close enough to read alongside her without crowding her personal space. The journal was written in archaic script, with certain passages inscribed in what appeared to be a family cipher rather than standard language.
She's being deliberately cryptic in certain sections,
Lyra noted, tracing a finger along a particularly encoded paragraph.
as if she feared someone might read this despite the protections.
Or perhaps she feared future generations of her own family might misuse the knowledge.
Cassius suggested thoughtfully.
Can you decipher it?
Parts of it. The Embersong cipher has evolved over generations, but certain core elements remain consistent.
She concentrated on a particularly relevant section, translating aloud.
The crown was never meant for singular use. Its creation was an act of union, not division. 5 elements, 5 points, 5 powers in harmony. What we have sundered was once whole.
The Crown of Cinders was originally connected to all 5 elements, not just fire.
That contradicts everything in the official histories.
Lyra continued reading, her excitement building as she deciphered more of the text.
We feared what we did not understand. How power multiplies when elements converge. Easier to separate, to classify, to control each in isolation, than to master the complexities of confluence.
Confirmation of what I've long suspected.
Cassius said quietly.
The guild system wasn't created because elements naturally conflict, but because combined elemental magic was too powerful, too unpredictable for any single faction to control.
Lyra looked up from the journal, meeting his eyes with shared understanding.
And the Crown of Cinders was an artifact designed before that separation, to harness the power of elemental convergence.
Which would explain why your ancestors manifested to warn against its use.
Cassius concluded.
If Lord Brightforge has discovered a way to activate even part of its original function,
He could potentially access powers beyond normal fire magic constraints,
Lyra finished the thought.
especially if combined with Embersong ancestral connections that already bridge the gap between living and spirit world flame manipulation.
The necklace at her throat pulsed more aggressively, as if responding to their discoveries. Despite the spirit shield Cassius had helped create, she felt a wave of physical warmth course through her body. The enchantment's more corporeal effects still functioning even as her mind remained clear. Cassius noticed her momentary discomfort.
the necklace is responding to specific discoveries. That suggests it may have monitoring functions as well as influence capabilities.
Meaning Alek might be aware when certain topics are discussed?
The possibility was concerning.
Not specific content, likely, but perhaps emotional reactions or certain trigger words.
Cassius clarified.
Monitoring enchantments are typically more generalized than influence ones. They detect patterns rather than specifics.
Lyra touched the small crack in the central opal.
Then we should be careful about what we discuss while I'm wearing this. At least until we know the extent of its capabilities.
She returned her attention to the journal, scanning for additional mentions of the crown. Further pages revealed fragmentary references to its creation and purpose, with many passages heavily encoded or partially obscured by what appeared to be deliberate ink smudges.
She was trying to hide something specific.
Lyra murmured, frustration evident in her voice.
The most crucial details are the most thoroughly obscured.
Try this.
Cassius suggested, reaching into his robes and withdrawing a small crystal prism that glowed with faint inner light.
Spirit seers use it to reveal hidden writing, text that's meant to be read only by those with the ability to perceive beyond the material world.
Lyra accepted the prism, noting how it felt neither warm nor cool against her skin, existing somehow between physical states. When she held it over the journal's pages, previously invisible text began to shimmer into existence between the written lines, glowing with subtle silver light.
Remarkable.
She breathed, leaning closer to read the revealed words.
The crown's 5 points represent the elemental pentad: fire, water, earth, air, and spirit. Each requires a willing vessel, a conscious participant. Forced access creates imbalance. One element dominated by another's will leads to corruption of both. The crown without consent is no crown at all, but a shackle that binds both wearer and element to diminished purpose.
Cassius's expression grew grave.
That confirms our concerns. If Lord Brightforge intends to use your ancestral connections without your full informed consent,
He would corrupt both his own magic and the Embersong flame legacy.
Lyra concluded, the implications sending a chill through her despite the necklace's persistent warmth.
And potentially damage the balance between elements even further.
They continued examining the journal, the spirit prism revealing additional hidden passages that detailed the crown's original purpose: to allow representatives of all 5 elemental affinities to work in conscious harmony, amplifying each other's strengths while compensating for individual limitations.
a remarkable vision.
Cassius said after they had read several pages of the hidden text.
Cooperative magical working rather than competitive isolation.
A vision deliberately erased from official histories.
Lyra noted, carefully turning another page.
Which raises the question, what happened to the crown after the separation? If it was designed for 5-element harmony, what use would a single guild have for it?
The answer appeared in the final hidden passage they uncovered.
We could not destroy what we did not fully understand. Division of power seemed safest. Each guild taking custody of their elemental component, the 5 points separated to prevent misuse of the whole. Yet even fragments retain echoes of their original purpose, yearning for completion. Fire's portion, the crown's central binding, remains with our lineage, sealed away where ambition cannot reach it.
The crown was dismantled.
Cassius said, piecing together the implications.
Each guild took custody of their elemental component.
And the Fire Guild's portion, apparently the central framework that connected the other pieces, was hidden somewhere by the Embersong line.
Lyra frowned thoughtfully.
But if it's been sealed away for generations, how could Alek know about it? And why would he believe he could access it through me specifically?
Before Cassius could respond, a distant sound echoed through the archives. The soft chime that signaled visitors entering the main chamber above. Lyra closed the journal quickly, looking toward the staircase they had descended earlier.
Someone's coming,
she whispered, though the sealed section's design would likely muffle their voices from outside.
The archives are typically empty during festivals. Most scholars take holiday.
Cassius moved to the chamber's entrance, listening intently. His expression shifted to one of alert focus, his body language changing subtly from scholarly to defensive.
Multiple visitors?
He murmured.
At least 3 from the sound of their movements.
Lyra carefully returned Marielle's journal to the shelf, ensuring it was properly positioned among the other Embersong texts. The spirit prism she tucked into her own robes, intending to examine other hidden writings when time permitted.
There's another exit,
she said quietly, moving to what appeared to be a solid section of wall between 2 shelves.
A maintenance passage for archive keepers. It leads to the eastern courtyard.
As she pressed her palm against a particular stone, revealing the hidden door's activation mechanism, footsteps became audible on the main archive staircase, heavy and purposeful. Not the careful tread of scholars concerned with preserving the silence of a research space.
Guard patrol?
Cassius suggested, though his tone indicated he suspected otherwise.
Guards follow established routes that deliberately avoid the sealed section.
Lyra replied, the hidden door sliding open with a soft scraping sound.
And they always announce their presence with the guild horn.
They slipped into the narrow maintenance passage, Lyra sealing the hidden door behind them. Unlike the well-lit archives, this tunnel contained only occasional enchanted markers set into the floor, providing minimal illumination that would be nearly invisible to those without mage-trained senses.
Can you see adequately?
Lyra asked, remembering that spirit mages often had different visual sensitivities than fire practitioners.
Better than adequately,
Cassius replied, his violet eyes seeming to gather what little light existed and reflect it back with unusual clarity.
Spirit magic involves navigating far darker realms than this.
They moved quickly through the passage, Lyra leading the way with practiced familiarity that prompted a questioning look from Cassius.
You've used this route before,
He observed as they navigated a junction where 3 similar tunnels converged.
The official library access hours never quite aligned with my research schedule,
She admitted with a slight smile.
particularly for topics the guild considers controversial.
I'm beginning to think our respective guilds made similar misjudgments about both of us.
Cassius said, a note of genuine amusement in his voice.
The perfect High Councilor's daughter with her secret passage knowledge and forbidden research. The spirit seer who questions the very foundations of elemental separation.
Perhaps that's why your theories about elemental compatibility resonated with me immediately.
Lyra replied, feeling a surprising ease in their conversation despite their current predicament.
They confirmed conclusions I'd reached independently through my own experiments.
You've conducted actual experiments combining fire and other elemental techniques.
His interest was evident, professional curiosity overriding even their need for haste.
Small-scale tests,
She clarified as they continued moving.
incorporating principles from water magic into flame control, Earth Guild structural theory into fire constructs, even some basic spirit meditation techniques to enhance duration of complex illusions.
With successful results.
Cassius guessed, studying her with new appreciation.
Far more successful than guild theory would predict.
Lyra confirmed.
The supposed catastrophic reactions never materialized. Instead, the combinations created more stable, more efficient magical expressions.
Just as I found when applying fire visualization techniques to spirit workings.
Cassius said, excitement evident in his voice despite their hushed tones.
The guilds insist such combinations should disrupt both elements, yet the opposite proves true when approached with proper understanding.
Their shared academic enthusiasm momentarily overshadowed the urgency of their situation. 2 scholars discovering a kindred intellectual spirit after years of pursuing unorthodox theories in isolation. The connection felt simultaneously novel and familiar, as if they were continuing a conversation long interrupted rather than beginning one anew. The necklace at Lyra's throat pulsed again, more intensely than before, sending a wave of heat through her body that momentarily disrupted her concentration. Despite the spirit shield protecting her conscious thoughts, the physical sensations remained distractingly potent.
We're nearly to the exit.
She said, refocusing on their immediate circumstances.
It emerges in a small gardener's shed in the eastern courtyard. At this hour, with festival preparations underway, the area should be relatively empty.
The passage began to slope upward, eventually ending at what appeared to be a solid stone wall. Lyra placed her palm against it, murmuring a simple activation phrase. The wall shimmered briefly, then turned transparent from their side, allowing them to see through to what indeed appeared to be a gardener's shed, while remaining solid to anyone looking in.
Clear.
Cassius confirmed after studying the space beyond.
Though we should have a plausible explanation ready for emerging from a maintenance shed during festival preparations.
Lyra considered their options quickly.
Festival couples often seek private moments away from the crowds. If anyone notices us, they'll likely assume...
She trailed off, suddenly aware of the implication.
That we were engaged in activities more personal than historical research.
Cassius finished, a hint of amusement touching his features despite the professional seriousness of his overall expression.
Precisely.
Lyra felt a flush rising to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the necklace's enchantment.
It's not ideal, but it would raise fewer questions than the truth.
I've maintained less plausible covers during investigations.
Cassius assured her, though something in his tone suggested this particular pretense might not be entirely disagreeable to him.
Shall I appear appropriately disheveled for authenticity?
He ran a hand through his dark hair, artfully disarranging the waves that had previously been neatly tied back. The effect was surprisingly transformative, giving him a more casual, approachable appearance that softened his scholarly intensity. Despite their serious circumstances, Lyra found herself smiling at his willingness to commit to their improvised cover story.
Very convincing,
She commented, then hesitantly reached up to loosen several pins from her own carefully arranged hair, allowing a few strands to fall free around her face.
Equally convincing.
Cassius observed, his violet eyes warming with something that might have been admiration before he quickly refocused on the exit.
Shall we?
Lyra activated the passage, transforming the transparent barrier into an actual door that swung outward into the shed. Sunlight filtered through the slats of the wooden structure, indicating the festival evening had not yet begun. The small space was crowded with gardening tools and bags of specialized volcanic soil used for Pyreholm's ornamental flame lilies. As they prepared to step out, Cassius paused, his head tilting slightly as if listening to something beyond ordinary hearing.
Wait.
He said softly, placing a cautioning hand on her arm.
There's someone just outside.
Lyra froze, straining her own senses but detecting nothing beyond the distant sounds of festival preparation from the main courtyards.
Are you certain?
Cassius nodded, his expression shifting to one of focused concentration.
Spirit seers perceive presences differently, an awareness of consciousness rather than physical sound. Someone is deliberately waiting in silence just beyond that door.
The confined space of the shed suddenly felt much smaller as they stood tensely, barely breathing, listening for any confirmation of Cassius's sensing. After several long moments, a shadow passed across the thin gap beneath the door. Subtle but unmistakable evidence of movement outside.
Not a coincidence,
Lyra whispered, meeting Cassius's eyes with shared understanding. Whoever had entered the archives behind them had either followed them through the passage or anticipated their exit point. They needed a different strategy, and quickly. The shed offered no alternate exits, and remaining hidden inside would only delay the inevitable discovery. If someone was indeed waiting to catch them emerging together, they needed to control the narrative of that discovery. The necklace pulsed warmly against Lyra's throat, as if sensing her concern and attempting to influence her decision-making despite the spirit shield. She reinforced her mental barriers, focusing on the immediate problem rather than the enchantment's distractions.
Our cover story,
She murmured, an idea forming rapidly.
if they're expecting to catch us in some compromising situation.
We give them exactly what they expect to see,
Cassius finished, immediately understanding her thinking.
but on our terms, controlling the information they obtain.
Precisely.
Lyra hesitated, then squared her shoulders with determination.
It would need to be convincing.
Something shifted in Cassius's expression, a momentary vulnerability beneath his usual composed exterior.
I'd need your explicit permission. Spirit mages don't engage in any form of deception involving physical contact without clear consent.
The formality of his request, even in their urgent circumstances, struck Lyra with unexpected force. Unlike Alek's enchanted necklace that sought to manipulate her emotions without consent, Cassius refused to even pretend at physical intimacy without her explicit agreement, a contrast that couldn't have been clearer.
You have my permission.
She said softly.
How should we proceed?
Follow my lead initially, then seem to take control of the situation.
He suggested, already shifting his posture to something more relaxed, less formal.
The contrast between spirit restraint and fire passion would read as authentic to any observer.
Lyra nodded, loosening her formal demeanor and allowing herself to appear more animated than her usual controlled presentation. As she did, Cassius moved closer, gently guiding her to position herself with her back against the shed's inner wall, visible from the doorway when it would open.
Ready?
He asked, his voice dropping to a softer register that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine, one entirely unrelated to the necklace's enchantment.
Ready,
She confirmed, mentally preparing for their improvised performance. Cassius reached past her to the door latch, deliberately making more noise than necessary, a clear signal to whoever waited outside that the shed's occupants were about to emerge. Then, with a fluid grace that surprised her, he stepped into her personal space, one hand coming to rest on the wall beside her head, while the other gently tilted her chin upward.
They'll expect to interrupt something.
He murmured, his face now inches from hers, close enough that she could see flecks of darker purple within his extraordinary violet eyes.
Forgive the presumption.
Before Lyra could respond, the shed door swung open, flooding the small space with late afternoon sunlight. Silhouetted in the doorway stood a familiar figure, Instructor Peller, the same junior teacher they had encountered earlier with his student group. His expression shifted rapidly from suspicious determination to embarrassed shock as he registered the apparent intimacy of the scene before him. Lyra, following Cassius's guidance to take control of the situation, reacted as any fire mage caught in a compromising position might, with indignant authority, rather than shame. She straightened, gently but firmly placing a hand on Cassius's chest to create space between them, while fixing Peller with a look of aristocratic displeasure.
Instructor Peller,
She said, infusing her voice with the precise mixture of embarrassment and haughty irritation that a high-ranking fire mage might display.
Is there a particular reason you're interrupting a private conversation?
The deliberate emphasis on conversation combined with their physical proximity created the perfect ambiguity, allowing Peller to believe he had interrupted something inappropriate while giving them plausible deniability.
Magister Embersong.
Peller stammered, his face flushing crimson.
That is, there were reports of unusual activity near the Eastern Archives, and with security heightened for the festival.
He broke off, his embarrassment compounding as he registered Cassius's presence more fully.
Magister Nightshade. I didn't realize, that is, diplomatic discussions often require privacy.
His discomfort was so palpable it took considerable effort for Lyra not to break character with inappropriate laughter. Beside her, she could feel Cassius maintaining his composure through similar effort, his chest rising and falling under her palm with carefully controlled breathing.
Indeed they do,
Lyra replied, straightening her robes with dignified movements.
Cross-guild perspectives on historical artifacts benefit from freedom from interruption.
Of course, Magister.
Peller managed, backing away with small, jerky movements.
My deepest apologies for the intrusion. I'll report that the area is secure.
That would be best.
Lyra agreed, somehow maintaining her aristocratic demeanor despite the absurdity of the situation. As Peller retreated with hasty, uncoordinated steps, Lyra and Cassius remained frozen in their positions, maintaining the tableau until the instructor disappeared around a corner. Only then did they separate fully, Lyra's hand dropping from Cassius's chest as he stepped back to a more appropriate distance. For a moment, they simply looked at each other in silent communication, acknowledging the narrow escape, the ridiculousness of Peller's reaction, and the strange intimacy of their improvised performance. Then, as if reaching the same breaking point simultaneously, they both succumbed to suppressed laughter.
His face?
Lyra managed, her carefully constructed High Councilor's daughter persona dissolving completely as she leaned against the shed wall for support.
I thought he might actually combust.
A safety hazard in a fire guild facility.
Cassius agreed, his own laughter revealing a warmth and openness she hadn't fully glimpsed before.
Though I'm not sure which shocked him more, finding us together or your magnificent aristocratic displeasure.
A technique perfected through years of observing my father intimidate junior counselors.
Lyra admitted, wiping away tears of mirth.
Though never applied in quite this context before.
Their shared laughter created a curious bubble of intimacy in the small shed. A moment outside the pressures of guild politics, ancestral warnings, and magical conspiracies. Just two people finding unexpected connection in the midst of chaos. Their guard momentarily lowered through shared absurdity. As their laughter gradually subsided, Lyra found herself studying Cassius with new awareness. The afternoon sunlight filtering through the shed slats illuminated him differently than the archive's amber lamps, or her tower's enchanted lighting, revealing subtle colors in his dark hair and highlighting the unusual clarity of his violet eyes. His smile, rarely displayed in full, transformed his scholarly features into something unexpectedly approachable. The necklace at her throat pulsed once, sharply, as if objecting to her observations. Despite its physical heat, the spirit shield held firm, keeping her thoughts clear and unmanipulated. For the first time, she could examine her genuine reaction to Cassius without the necklace's interference, and what she discovered surprised her. The intellectual connection she'd acknowledged from their first meeting had been joined by something more personal, an appreciation for his ethical boundaries, his respectful approach to their collaboration, his willingness to meet her as an equal rather than an asset to be directed. Qualities entirely absent from her interactions with Alek, whose calculated charm always carried undertones of control. As if sensing the direction of her thoughts, Cassius's expression shifted to something more serious, though the warmth remained in his eyes.
We should proceed to the main courtyard. Pella's embarrassment will keep him quiet temporarily, but rumors travel quickly during festivals.
Yes,
Lyra agreed, gathering her composure.
and we still need to prepare for the midnight procession.
They stepped out of the shed together, blinking in the brighter light of the eastern courtyard. Festival preparations were indeed underway. Gardeners arranging special fire-resistant floral displays, apprentices practicing minor illumination spells for the evening's decorations, guild staff carrying supplies toward the main celebration areas. As they moved to join the general flow of activity, Cassius glanced at her with an expression that combined professional focus with something more personal, a shared acknowledgement of the unexpected connection that had formed between them.
For what it's worth,
He said quietly.
that was the most convincing research consultation I've ever conducted.
The simple comment, delivered with just the right balance of humor and sincerity, sent an unexpected warmth through Lyra that had nothing to do with fire magic or enchanted necklaces, and everything to do with the violet-eyed spirit seer walking beside her.
High praise from a spirit guild professional.
She replied, finding it easier than expected to match his tone.
Though I suspect cross-guild historical discussion might be the more diplomatic description for our official report.
Naturally.
His mouth curved into that rare smile that transformed his scholarly features.
With appropriate footnotes detailing Instructor Pella's contributions to interdisciplinary relations.
Lyra nearly stumbled at that, another bubble of laughter threatening to escape. She composed herself quickly as they joined the main path through the eastern gardens, now bustling with festival preparations. Guild members hurried past carrying decorations and ritual implements, while apprentices practiced simple illumination spells that would adorn the evening's celebrations.
I may never be able to look at Peller during council education reports again,
She admitted, keeping her voice low as they navigated through the crowds.
His expression was so perfectly scandalized.
The Spirit Guild has strict protocols against reading private thoughts,
Cassius said with mock seriousness.
but some memories practically project themselves. His mental narrative was quite colorful.
You didn't.
Lyra glanced at him, half horrified, half impressed.
I didn't need to.
He clarified, his eyes crinkling with amusement.
His face was eloquent enough.
Cassius adjusted his silver-gray robes as they walked, his fingers catching on a loose thread where Lyra's hand had rested against his chest during their improvised performance. The small gesture drew her attention back to that moment of unexpected proximity.
I should apologize for the theatrical aspects of our escape.
she said, more formal now that they were in public view.
Fire Guild education emphasizes decisive action in uncertain situations.
No apology necessary.
He assured her, his tone matching her more professional demeanor while his eyes retained their warmth.
Spirit seers are trained to adapt to unexpected circumstances. Though I admit, your particular approach to adaptation was refreshingly direct.
Something in his phrasing, the slight emphasis on direct, the subtle appreciation in his tone, caused Lyra's cheeks to warm in a way entirely unrelated to the necklace's enchantment. The spirit shield he'd helped create allowed her to recognize her genuine reactions without the confusion of magical influence. Their path took them past a small troupe of fire dancers practicing for the evening's entertainment. Young mages manipulated ribbons of flame between their hands, weaving patterns that would later be synchronized into complex performances. Several dancers looked up as Lyra and Cassius passed, their expressions shifting from casual interest to intense curiosity at the unusual sight of the High Councilor's daughter walking alongside a spirit mage.
We've attracted attention,
Cassius noted quietly.
Unavoidable during festival preparations,
Lyra replied.
though it gives credence to our official purpose. My showing you guild traditions as part of your diplomatic visit.
Speaking of which,
Cassius said, his tone shifting to something more thoughtful.
our discoveries in the archives present both opportunity and challenge. The Hall of Ancestors remains inaccessible, but we now understand more about the Crown's original purpose and the ancestral warning's likely meaning.
And the midnight procession is only hours away.
Lyra added, her mind refocusing on their urgent situation despite the lingering awareness of their shared moment in the shed.
If Alek intends to use it to further strengthen the connection the necklace is establishing,
We need more specific information.
Cassius concluded.
The journal provided valuable context, but few practical details about how to counter whatever working Lord Brightforge is constructing.
They paused beside an ornamental flame fountain, one of many such features throughout Pyreholm that served both aesthetic and practical purposes, providing both beauty and emergency fire sources for mages. The dancing waters, infused with fire essence that caused them to shimmer with inner light, provided convenient cover for their conversation.
what are you suggesting?
Lyra asked, noting the contemplative expression that had replaced his earlier amusement.
A direct approach.
Cassius said, his violet eyes meeting hers with calm intensity.
A seance to communicate with your ancestors directly, using your natural connection as the conduit.
The proposal was simultaneously logical and radical. Ancestral communication was traditionally conducted in formal settings. The Hall of Ancestors, with its eternal flame and centuries of accumulated ritual energy, not improvised in the midst of festival chaos.
Without the hall's focusing elements?
Lyra questioned, considering the magical implications.
The ambient energy of festival preparations would create significant interference.
Unless we found another location with historical significance to the Embersong line,
Cassius suggested.
somewhere with established connection to your ancestors, but not currently under Lord Brightforge's surveillance.
Lyra considered the possibilities, mentally reviewing Pyreholm's layout and her family's historical connections throughout the city.
The Ember Sanctuary.
She said finally.
It's a meditation garden established by my great-grandmother. Technically part of the family estate but separate from the main grounds. Accessed through the Northeastern Conservatory.
Would it have sufficient historical resonance for ancestral communication?
Cassius asked.
More than sufficient.
Lyra confirmed.
It was specifically designed as a personal communion space, with a central fire basin positioned over a natural vent in the volcanic stone. Ariana Embersong used it for private conversations with our ancestors, particularly when seeking counsel away from official guild oversight.
Perfect.
Cassius nodded, professional interest lighting his features.
If we combined your natural ancestral connection with my spirit communication techniques, we might establish clear contact despite the festival energies.
The necklace at Lyra's throat pulsed once, sharply, as if objecting to the plan. She reinforced her mental shield automatically, an action that didn't escape Cassius's notice.
The necklace doesn't approve,
he observed quietly.
All the more reason to proceed.
Lyra replied with determination.
When can we attempt it?
Cassius glanced toward the western horizon, where the sun was beginning its descent toward evening.
before the midnight procession begins, but after full dark would be ideal. The veil between worlds thins naturally at twilight transitions.
I'm expected at the festival opening banquet,
Lyra calculated quickly.
but could reasonably excuse myself by ninth bell, citing preparation needs for the procession. The Ember Sanctuary would be completely deserted by then. Everyone else will be at the main celebration.
I'll need to gather certain materials.
Cassius said, his tone thoughtful.
Nothing elaborate, but specific components that facilitate interdimensional communication.
The Diplomatic Wing's guest quarters should have been stocked with typical Spirit Guild requirements.
Lyra suggested.
It's standard protocol for visiting mages.
Then it's settled.
Cassius concluded.
We'll meet at the Northeastern Conservatory entrance after ninth bell. Until then, we should maintain normal festival activities to avoid arousing suspicion.
The practical planning had temporarily overshadowed the lingering awareness of their shed encounter. But as they prepared to separate, Lyra found herself unusually reluctant to end their conversation. Cassius seemed to share the sentiment, his violet eyes holding hers a moment longer than strictly necessary.
Be careful with the necklace in public settings.
He advised softly.
The shield should hold against its influence on your thoughts, but in crowds, with heightened emotions and festival magic.
I understand.
She assured him.
I'll maintain additional mental barriers during the banquet.
His concern felt different from her father's political caution or Alek's possessive attention, more respectful of her capabilities while still acknowledging the genuine risks. The distinction was subtle but significant.
Until ninth bell then.
He said, inclining his head slightly in the formal gesture of Spirit Guild farewell.
Until then,
Lyra confirmed, returning the gesture with the Fire Guild's traditional response. A subtle warming of the air between them, comfortable rather than challenging. As they parted ways, Cassius toward the diplomatic wing, Lyra toward her tower to prepare for the evening banquet, she found herself reflecting on the rapid evolution of their relationship. From formal introduction to research partners, to whatever this new awareness between them represented. All in less than a day. Under normal circumstances, she might have questioned such swift connection, but these were hardly normal circumstances. The necklace pulsed against her throat, a tangible reminder of the constraints still binding her to Alek's schemes. Yet for the first time since he had fastened it around her neck, Lyra felt something stronger than its enchantment. A genuine anticipation for the evening ahead that no magical influence could manufacture or diminish. The Northeastern Conservatory glowed with soft illumination, its glass panels reflecting the myriad festival lights from the city beyond, while sheltering rare flame flowers that bloomed only in controlled heat conditions. By ninth bell, the space stood empty as Lyra had predicted, all garden staff and guild members having departed for the main celebrations. Lyra moved quickly through the winding paths, her festival attire exchanged for simpler robes better suited to magical working. The gown's deep burgundy absorbed rather than reflected light, allowing her to pass like a shadow through the flowering arbors. She had managed to excuse herself from the opening banquet with minimal difficulty. Her father preoccupied with guild politics, Alek engaged in conversation with visiting dignitaries, neither paying particular attention to her stated need to prepare for the procession. The entrance to the Ember Sanctuary was concealed behind a living wall of fire vines, plants whose tendrils glowed with inner light, their blossoms releasing tiny sparks when they opened at night. Lyra activated the hidden door with a specific pattern of touches against the central vine stem, causing the foliage to part and reveal the narrow passage beyond. Cassius was already waiting, his silver-gray robes replaced with simpler attire of deep blue-black that reminded Lyra of the night sky between stars. He carried a small satchel that presumably contained the materials he'd mentioned gathering,
You came through the private entrance.
She observed, noting the absence of disturbance in the main conservatory that would have indicated passage through the public doors.
Spirit mages develop certain skills for moving unnoticed,
He replied with a slight smile.
particularly useful when conducting unorthodox investigations in politically sensitive locations.
The casual admission of what was essentially infiltration expertise might have concerned Lyra under different circumstances. Tonight, it merely confirmed his resourcefulness.
Have you been waiting long?
Not at all. I was admiring your great-grandmother's botanical achievements.
He gestured toward the fire vines.
Creating living flames that sustain rather than consume is remarkably sophisticated work.
She was considered somewhat eccentric in her time.
Lyra said, feeling a rush of pride in her ancestors' innovations.
More interested in creative applications of fire magic than the traditional destructive ones.
A family trait, perhaps.
Cassius suggested, his violet eyes studying her with that perceptive gaze that seemed to see beyond surface appearances. Rather than respond directly, Lyra activated the sanctuary entrance, gesturing for him to follow her into the passage beyond. Unlike the cool, practical design of the archive tunnel, this pathway was lined with smooth volcanic glass that captured and refracted their movement, creating the impression of walking through frozen flame.
Beautiful craftsmanship.
Cassius commented as they proceeded deeper into the passage.
The interplay of light and shadow is reminiscent of certain spirit realm transitions.
The design was intentional.
Lyra explained.
Ariana believed the journey to ancestral communion should prepare the mind through progressive separation from ordinary perception.
The passage opened eventually into the Ember Sanctuary itself, a circular garden nestled within a natural volcanic crater, open to the sky above while sheltered from view by the higher walls surrounding it. At the center stood a raised fire basin of ancient design, positioned over a natural vent in the volcanic stone that released occasional wisps of heated air from deep below Pyreholm's foundations. Around this central feature, the garden had been arranged in concentric circles of plantings that thrived in graduated heat zones, from the flame-resistant varieties nearest the basin to the more conventional fire blooms at the outer perimeter. Stone benches positioned at cardinal points provided meditation seats, each carved with Embersong family symbols that glowed faintly in response to Lyra's presence.
Your great-grandmother created something extraordinary here.
Cassius said quietly, his appreciation evident as he took in the harmonious design.
A perfect balance of natural and magical elements.
It hasn't been used for its intended purpose in generations,
Lyra admitted, moving toward the central basin.
The guild gradually shifted toward more formal, public ancestor communications. Less personal communion, more political performance.
Another casualty of the increasing rigidity of guild structures.
Cassius observed, following her to the center of the garden. He set his satchel down carefully on the stone rim of the basin, removing items with methodical precision. A small silver bowl, various packets of herbs and minerals, a crystal similar to the prism he had used in the archives but slightly larger.
These will help focus our working,
he explained as he arranged the materials.
The herbal elements create specific resonances in the veil between worlds. The minerals serve as anchors for spectral energy.
Lyra watched with genuine interest, noting the differences between his preparations and the more elaborate rituals employed in official Fire Guild ceremonies.
No ceremonial flames? No incantations?
Those are largely theatrical elements added over centuries to impress observers.
Cassius replied with a candid practicality she found refreshing.
Effective ancestral communication requires only 3 things. A blood connection to those being summoned, a location with established historical resonance, and a properly trained facilitator to safely open and maintain the connection.
You're the facilitator. I'm the blood connection, and this sanctuary provides the historical resonance.
Lyra summarized.
Precisely.
Cassius completed his arrangements, then looked up at her with serious eyes.
However, there's an additional factor we should consider. The necklace.
Lyra's hand rose unconsciously to the fire opals at her throat.
Will it interfere with the communication?
Possibly, or it might attempt to monitor or influence the interaction.
He studied the necklace with professional focus.
The shield I helped establish should prevent direct manipulation of your thoughts, but the necklace's connection to your ancestral pathways could potentially allow it to distort what we receive.
Can we prevent that?
Lyra asked, determination replacing concern.
Not prevent entirely, but counterbalance.
Cassius suggested.
If we establish a secondary connection between your ancestral abilities and my spirit perception, it might create an alternative pathway that the necklace can't easily infiltrate.
The proposal carried significant implications. Creating direct magical connections between practitioners of different guilds was rarely attempted, not just because of political taboos, but because conventional wisdom held that such linkages could destabilize both mages' core energies.
You're suggesting we combine fire and spirit magic directly?
Lyra said, wanting confirmation of his meaning.
Despite centuries of guild teaching that such combinations lead to catastrophic imbalance.
I'm suggesting,
Cassius replied carefully,
that those teachings might prioritize maintaining guild separation over magical truth. My research indicates that complementary connections between different elemental affinities don't create instability. They establish new equilibriums that can actually enhance magical expression.
The theory aligned with Lyra's own experimental findings, yet hearing it stated so directly by another mage, particularly one with Cassius's expertise, sent a thrill of validation through her.
How would we establish such a connection?
She asked, already considering the magical mechanics involved.
Through synchronized focus and guided energy exchange,
Cassius explained, moving to stand on the opposite side of the fire basin.
we would need to gradually harmonize our magical signatures, finding resonance points where fire and spirit energies can interface constructively rather than destructively.
The description sounded clinical, but Lyra recognized the profound intimacy such a process would entail. Magical signatures were deeply personal, as unique as fingerprints, and far more revealing of one's inner nature. Allowing another mage to harmonize with that signature was an act of extraordinary trust.
It would be intense.
She observed, measuring her words carefully.
Yes,
Cassius acknowledged, his violet eyes holding hers across the basin.
and once established, the connection would create awareness beyond ordinary magical partnerships. Each would sense aspects of the other's magic, perhaps even their emotional states during intense workings.
The implications hung in the air between them. This wasn't merely a practical solution to their immediate problem, but a profound decision with lasting consequences. Once formed, such connections didn't simply dissolve when their immediate purpose was fulfilled.
Are you certain this is necessary?
Lyra asked, not from reluctance, but from awareness of what he was offering.
I believe it's our best option for establishing clear ancestral communication without interference.
Cassius replied honestly.
But I would not suggest it if I weren't prepared to accept the full implications.
The simple statement carried more genuine commitment than all of Alek's elaborate courtship gestures combined. Cassius was offering a form of magical partnership based on mutual respect and shared purpose. The antithesis of the control mechanisms embedded in the necklace's enchantment.
Then let us begin.
Lyra decided, her voice steady despite the quickening of her pulse. Cassius nodded, his expression shifting to focused concentration as he activated the central fire basin with a gesture. Unlike typical fire magic that would have produced dramatic flames, his spirit-based ignition created a subtle, blue-white illumination that hovered just above the basin's surface. Neither fully flame nor spirit manifestation, but something between the two.
Rest your hands on the basin's edge.
He instructed quietly.
Allow your natural fire affinity to flow into the stone, but gently, seeking connection rather than control.
Lyra placed her palms against the ancient volcanic stone, feeling its dormant heat respond to her touch. Rather than directing her magic outward as she typically would, she allowed it to seep slowly into the material. A gradual sharing rather than an assertion of will.
Good.
Cassius murmured, placing his own hands on the opposite side.
Now we establish initial resonance through the basin itself. The stone serves as mediator between our different elemental energies.
As he spoke, Lyra felt a subtle vibration begin within the stone. A gentle pulse that didn't originate from either her magic or his, but from the interaction between them. The sensation was unlike anything she had experienced before. Neither the assertive dominance typical of fire magic interactions, nor the ethereal disconnection she had expected from spirit energy. Instead, it felt like discovering a harmony she hadn't known existed. A complementary pattern that enhanced rather than diminished her own magical expression. The blue-white light above the basin began to shift, incorporating threads of amber and violet that twisted around each other without merging, maintaining distinct identities while creating something new in their interaction.
The initial resonance is established,
Cassius said, his voice taking on that slightly distant quality she had noticed during his deeper spirit workings.
Now, we need to gradually extend the connection beyond the basin, creating a direct pathway between our magical cores.
This was the more challenging step, moving from the mediated connection through stone to direct magical interface. Lyra focused on the unique vibrational pattern they had established, carefully extending her awareness along it toward Cassius's energy signature. As their magical fields began to interact more directly, the sensation intensified dramatically. Lyra's breath caught as she felt the first true touch of spirit magic against her inner fire. Cool but not cold, fluid but not formless, carrying a depth of perception that expanded her awareness in unexpected directions. Across the basin, Cassius drew a sharp breath, clearly experiencing a similarly intense reaction to direct contact with fire energy.
Your magic is remarkable,
He said softly, a note of wonder in his voice.
so precisely controlled, yet so alive with possibility.
The genuine appreciation, so different from Alek's calculating assessment of her potential usefulness, touched something deep within Lyra. She allowed her awareness to extend further, carefully exploring the contours of Cassius's magical signature, as he did the same with hers. Where she had expected rigid discipline based on Spirit Guild stereotypes, she discovered supple strength, a flexibility that accommodated new information and adapted to changing circumstances without losing its essential character. His magic reflected his mind, methodical but not rigid, disciplined but not constrained, powerful in ways that had nothing to do with raw force and everything to do with depth of understanding. As their magical exploration continued, the connection between them strengthened and expanded. The light above the basin transformed, the separate threads of amber and violet beginning to dance around each other in increasingly complex patterns, occasionally touching to create momentary flashes of color that existed in neither of their natural palettes. Something entirely new, born from their interaction.
The connection is stabilizing.
Cassius observed, his voice slightly breathless from the intensity of the experience.
We need to direct it now toward ancestral communication, focusing our combined awareness on the Embersong lineage.
Lyra nodded, shifting her focus toward the familiar internal pathways that connected her to her ancestors. Conduits of magical heritage that extended beyond physical time. She felt Cassius's presence alongside her in this exploration, his spirit perception illuminating aspects of these connections she had never fully perceived before.
Your ancestral links are unusually vibrant.
He noted with professional appreciation.
Multiple strong connections rather than the single primary line most families maintain.
The Embersong tradition encourages active communion with multiple branches of the family tree.
Lyra explained, her voice sounding distant to her own ears as their shared focus deepened.
Not just direct predecessors, but any ancestor with whom we share magical affinity.
As they directed their combined awareness toward these ancestral pathways, Lyra felt the necklace at her throat respond, pulsing with increased warmth, its enchantment seeming to reach for the connections they were activating. But the pathways she and Cassius had established remained clear, their magical resonance creating a channel the necklace couldn't easily penetrate.
I can feel them responding.
Cassius murmured, his violet eyes now showing that clouded appearance of deep spirit sight.
Several distinct presences approaching from different directions.
The air around them began to shift, taking on a curious density that wasn't quite physical. The blue-white light above the basin pulsed in rhythm with their combined magical signatures, creating a beacon that extended beyond ordinary perception.
They're coming.
Lyra whispered, sensing the approach of familiar yet distant presences. The unique magical signatures of Embersong ancestors responding to their call. The first manifestation appeared as a subtle shimmer in the air beside the basin, gradually resolving into the translucent figure of a woman in antiquated Fire Guild robes. Her features shared the distinctive Embersong characteristics: amber eyes, high cheekbones, an expression of dignified determination. Lyra recognized her immediately from family portraits.
Great-grandmother Ariana.
She said softly, genuine emotion coloring her voice. More figures began to appear. 3 additional manifestations forming a semicircle around the basin. An elderly man with a flame-shaped birthmark on his temple. A middle-aged woman whose robes bore the insignia of an archmagus. A younger man with a scholar's ink-stained fingers and intense, searching eyes.
The same 4 who appeared at the blessing ceremony.
Lyra realized aloud.
But clearer now. More defined.
Because you're actively participating in the summons.
Cassius explained, his focus unwavering as he maintained their connection.
Your conscious involvement strengthens the manifestation.
The spectral figures regarded them with varying expressions. Curiosity, concern, and in Ariana's case, what appeared to be approval as her gaze moved between Lyra and Cassius, noting the unique pattern of their combined magic hovering above the basin.
Descendons.
Ariana's manifestation spoke, her voice carrying the distinctive echo of ancestral communication. Words that existed somewhere between thought and sound.
You have heard our warning, yet the path remains in shadow.
We seek clarity.
Lyra responded, following the traditional format for ancestral dialogue.
The Crown of Cinders. What danger does it present?
The 4 ancestors exchanged glances. A silent communication passing between them before the elderly man stepped forward, his birthmark glowing faintly as he spoke.
The crown was sundered for cause.
He said, his tone grave.
5 points, 5 elements, 5 bears in harmony, or none at all. Partial restoration invites corruption.
Lord Brightforge seeks to use it.
Cassius stated, directing the conversation towards specific information.
Through the Embersong bloodline connection.
The scholar ancestor nodded, his expression darkening.
He has recovered 3 points. Fire's binding center, Earth's foundation, water's fluidity. He seeks to combine these without air's breath or spirit's consciousness.
An incomplete circuit?
The archmagus ancestor added, her spectral hands moving in patterns that mimicked magical flow.
Drawing power without proper dispersion or balance? Fire dominant without tempering elements?
The necklace.
Lyra touched the opals at her throat.
It's mapping my ancestral connections to access Embersong flame patterns.
A pathway without permission.
Ariana confirmed, her manifestation moving closer to examine the jewelry.
Ancient magic perverted to modern ambition. The union he seeks is not partnership but subjugation.
What happens if he succeeds?
Cassius asked, the question direct but essential. The 4 ancestors seemed to confer silently again, before responding in unison, their voices overlapping in haunting harmony.
Flame without
conscience,
power without wisdom,
without destruction,
without renewal.
destruction without renewal.
The midnight procession.
Lyra pressed, aware of time's passage even in this seemingly suspended moment.
How will he use it?
5 gates.
The scholar explained, his spectral fingers sketching symbols in the air between them.
5 points of power across the city. The final working at midnight aligns with ancient ley configurations that once connected all elemental territories.
He needs your willing participation at each gate.
Ariana added, fixing Lyra with an intense gaze.
The necklace creates artificial willingness, but true consent would strengthen the working exponentially.
How do we stop it?
Cassius asked, the practical question carrying all their shared urgency.
Restore balance.
The Archmagus replied.
True elemental harmony requires equal voice, equal power, equal presence. What he attempts alone must be countered by unified opposition.
The spirit shield.
Lyra realized, understanding dawning.
Our connected magics, fire and spirit together, create a different kind of balance than he expects.
Ariana's manifestations smiled, the expression warming her spectral features as she looked between them.
You begin to understand. The connection you have forged opens possibilities he cannot anticipate.
The necklace at Lyra's throat pulsed sharply, as if sensing the direction of their discussion. The ancestors noticed immediately, their expressions growing concerned.
He reaches for you even now.
The elderly ancestor warned, gesturing toward the necklace.
The connection you have established provides temporary shelter, but he will sense interference.
We should conclude.
Cassius suggested, maintaining their magical connection while beginning to modulate its intensity.
Prolonged manifestation risks detection, particularly with the festival energies amplifying magical resonances across the city.
Ariana moved closer to Lyra, her spectral form shimmering with increased definition as she focused her communication directly.
Granddaughter of my line, hear me clearly. The crown seeks completion. It cannot be destroyed, only balanced. What fire claims, spirit must temper. What ambition builds, wisdom must guide.
Her gaze shifted to include Cassius.
The connection you have forged defies centuries of separation. In this defiance lies both danger and possibility.
A ghost of a smile touched her features.
Much like Arkan and myself, when we first discovered the harmonics between our opposing elements.
Before Lyra could ask who Arkan was, a name unfamiliar from family histories, the manifestations began to fade, the energy required to maintain their presence across the veil growing too costly to sustain.
Remember.
The ancestors' voices blended as they dissolved back into spectral light.
Willingly
Given, freely
Freely accessible.
submission corrupts
For
both giver and
submission
taker.
corrupts
The
both
true crown
giver
requires
and
harmony,
taker.
dominance.
Not dominance.
True crown requires harmony, not dominance.
Their final words hung in the air as the manifestations disappeared completely, leaving only the blue-white light still hovering above the basin, shot through with intertwined threads of amber and violet that continued their intricate dance. For several moments, Lyra and Cassius remained connected through their established resonance, both processing the revelations from the ancestral communication. The experience had been more profound, more specific, and more personal than either had anticipated. Gradually, with careful attention to maintaining stability, they began to disengage their direct magical connection, not severing it completely, but reducing its active intensity to a quieter background awareness that would persist without conscious effort. As they withdrew their hands from the basin, the light above it dimmed slowly, eventually settling into a subtle glow that revealed the changed nature of the space. The garden around them seemed more vibrant, the colors deeper, the scents more intense, as if their magical working had temporarily heightened all perception.
That was...
Lyra began, finding words inadequate to describe the experience.
Extraordinary.
Cassius finished, his violet eyes meeting hers with shared understanding. The connection they had established remained perceptible between them, not invasive, but present, like knowing someone stood beside you even without looking directly at them.
Ariana seemed to recognize what we were attempting.
Lyra observed, still processing her ancestors' final comments.
She mentioned someone named Arkan. A connection between opposing elements.
Perhaps another piece of history removed from official records.
Cassius suggested, carefully returning his materials to the satchel.
The ancestors' message about balance and willing partnership seemed particularly pointed.
As was their warning about Alek's version of the crown.
Lyra added, touching the necklace thoughtfully.
3 points, not 5. An incomplete circuit focusing power without proper distribution.
Fire dominant without tempering elements.
Cassius quoted, his expression thoughtful.
Which explains why he specifically targets your family's ancestral connections. The Embersong line has unusually robust fire magic that could potentially compensate for the missing elemental components.
Lyra moved around the basin to stand beside him, both of them gazing at the now softly glowing central light. Their physical proximity echoed the magical connection they had established. Comfortable, natural, as if they had known each other far longer than a single day.
What Ariana said about our connection,
She began, then hesitated, uncertain how to address the personal implications that had emerged alongside their practical discoveries.
Defying centuries of separation.
Cassius quoted softly.
In this defiance lies both danger and possibility.
He turned to face her directly, his expression open in a way few ever witnessed from a spirit mage.
The magical resonance we established was unlike anything I've experienced in years of cross-elemental research. Fire and spirit don't merely coexist. They enhance each other when approached with mutual respect rather than dominance.
The observation applied to more than just their magical interaction, and both knew it. The necklace pulsed once against Lyra's throat, but the spirit shield held firm, allowing her to acknowledge her genuine feelings without magical interference.
we should prepare for the midnight procession.
She said, practical concerns reasserting themselves despite the lingering intimacy of their shared experience.
If Alek intends to use the 5 gates as focus points for his incomplete crown working,
We need to find a way to counter his influence at each location.
Cassius agreed, though neither made any immediate move to leave the sanctuary. The connection between them had created a private world that seemed separate from the urgency beyond. A moment of shared understanding that transcended guild boundaries and political complexities.
the ancestors said true consent would strengthen his working exponentially.
Lyra recalled.
The necklace creates artificial willingness, but with your shield protecting my conscious thoughts.
You can appear to comply while maintaining your true intention.
Cassius finished, understanding her thinking immediately.
And with our established connection, we could potentially introduce a countering influence at each gate.
The plan began to take shape between them, ideas flowing with unusual synchronicity. Another manifestation of the magical resonance they had created. Where fire and spirit should have conflicted according to guild doctrine, they instead complemented perfectly, each perspective enhancing the other. As they finalized their strategy, the distant sounds of festival celebrations reminded them of the world beyond their sanctuary. The politically complex, guild-divided reality that awaited their return. Yet something fundamental had changed. The connection they had forged would persist regardless of external circumstances. A private defiance of centuries of enforced separation.
We should return separately.
Lyra suggested reluctantly.
Your absence from diplomatic quarters and mine from festival preparations will soon be noticed.
Agreed?
Cassius said, though his violet eyes held hers with unspoken acknowledgement of what had passed between them. Something far more significant than a simple magical working or ancestral communication. As they prepared to leave the sanctuary, retracing their steps through the winding passage that would return them to the northeastern conservatory, Lyra found herself unexpectedly balanced, despite the dangers ahead. The necklace still encircled her throat. Alek's plans still threatened both her and the wider magical community. The midnight procession still approached with its potential for disaster. Yet alongside these concerns existed new certainty. A connection forged in perfect resonance, defying centuries of artificial separation. Whatever came next, she would face it not just with her own strength, but with the harmonized support of an unexpected ally who had become something much more.
Until midnight, then.
Cassius said softly as they reached the conservatory entrance, the formal phrase carrying layers of meaning beyond its simple words.
Until midnight,
Lyra confirmed, their eyes meeting with shared understanding before they separated, each returning to their expected roles in the festival celebrations beyond. The necklace pulsed once more against her throat as she watched him disappear among the flowering arbors. A futile attempt to redirect her thoughts and feelings that found no purchase against the shield strengthened by their shared working. For the first time since Alek had fastened it around her neck, Lyra felt truly free of its influence. Not just mentally protected, but emotionally liberated by the discovery of a connection based on respect rather than control. Harmony rather than dominance. Possibility rather than constraint. The journey from the Ember Sanctuary back to her tower felt surreal. Lyra moved through the festival-adorned corridors like a ghost passing through a celebration, physically present but emotionally elsewhere, her mind still half connected to the magical resonance she and Cassius had created. Around her, Pyreholm pulsed with pre-midnight festivities. Fire mages demonstrated elaborate magical displays for appreciative crowds. Musicians played traditional melodies on heat-tuned instruments that shifted pitch with the intensity of nearby flames. Vendors called out their wares, spiced festival treats, commemorative trinkets, small enchanted tokens meant to bring good fortune for the coming year. All of it, the sounds, the colors, the scents, seemed simultaneously more vivid and more distant than usual. The magical working in the sanctuary had heightened her perceptions, while also creating a strange buffer between her and the ordinary world, as if she existed partly in another dimension. The necklace at her throat pulsed with increasing frequency as she walked, its warmth growing more insistent. Blocked from influencing her thoughts by the spirit shield Cassius had helped create, the enchantment seemed to be redirecting its efforts toward physical sensations instead. Waves of inappropriate heat washed through her body at random intervals, creating distracting flushes that made concentrating on her surroundings difficult. Lyra maintained her composure through sheer will, acknowledging the sensations without surrendering to them. Her mind remained clear, the shield protecting her conscious thoughts even as her body responded to the enchantment's manipulations. The dichotomy was both liberating and frustrating, intellectual freedom paired with corporeal constraint. When she finally reached the sanctuary of her tower, Lyra sealed the door behind her with both physical lock and magical wards, stronger than her usual protections. Only then did she allow her carefully maintained facade to crack, her shoulders slumping as she leaned heavily against the door. The enormity of her situation crashed over her without warning. A tidal wave of realization that had been building since Alek first placed the necklace around her throat, but which she had been too busy surviving to fully process. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps as the implications cascaded through her mind. In less than 24 hours, she had discovered her fiancé was using forbidden enchantments to manipulate her emotions and access her ancestral magic. Learned of a potentially catastrophic magical artifact he intended to activate using her as an unwitting conduit. Formed an unprecedented magical connection with a spirit mage who challenged everything she'd been taught about elemental separation. And now faced a midnight ceremony that could either thwart Alek's plans or deliver her completely into his power. The weight of it all, the danger, the betrayal, the impossible choices, suddenly felt too heavy to bear alone. Lyra slid down the door until she sat on the floor, her formal robes pooling around her like spilled wine. For the first time since the engagement announcement, she allowed herself to feel the full extent of her fear and fury without filtering it through the lens of political calculation or diplomatic necessity.
How dare he?
She whispered, her voice raw with emotion as tears began to spill down her cheeks.
How dare he?
The necklace flared with heat in response to her anger, sending another wave of inappropriate physical sensation through her body. A crude attempt to redirect her emotions that only intensified her outrage. Even now, when she finally allowed herself to feel the genuine emotions she had been suppressing, the enchantment sought to manipulate her experience.
I am not your puppet.
She hissed at the jewelry, tears flowing freely now as she clutched the central stone, feeling the small crack beneath her fingers.
I am not your conduit or your vessel or your convenient political alliance.
The declaration felt both futile and essential. A private rebellion that changed nothing practical about her circumstances while allowing her to reclaim some small measure of her identity. The necklace pulsed again, more aggressively, its physical effects intensifying as if in retaliation for her defiance. A soft knock at her door startled her from this moment of raw vulnerability. Lyra hastily wiped her cheeks, though she knew her reddened eyes would betray her emotional state to whoever stood outside.
Lyra?
Zara's voice pitched low with concern.
Are you in there? The festival steward is looking for you. The procession preparations are beginning.
Relief flooded through her at the sound of her friend's voice rather than some guild official's formal summons.
Just a moment,
she called, rising unsteadily to her feet and smoothing her robes before removing the wards and opening the door. Zara's expression shifted instantly from mild concern to acute alarm as she took in Lyra's tear-streaked face. Without a word, she slipped inside, closing and sealing the door behind her with a quick gesture.
What happened?
She demanded, guiding Lyra toward the small sitting area near the window.
Did Alek do something? Did the spirit seer?
Everything's happening,
Lyra interrupted, fresh tears threatening despite her effort to regain composure.
Everything at once, and I can't.
Her voice broke as another wave of heat from the necklace disrupted her attempt to explain, sending a flush of unwelcome sensation through her body. Zara noticed immediately, her eyes narrowing at the necklace.
It's getting worse, isn't it? The enchantment.
Lyra nodded, taking several deep breaths to steady herself.
Cassius, Magister Nightshade, helped create a shield that protects my thoughts from its influence. But now it's intensifying the physical effects instead.
Cassius, is it?
Zara raised an eyebrow, momentarily distracted from the crisis by the familiar use of the spirit seer's name.
When did that development occur?
That's the least of it,
Lyra replied, though a different kind of warmth touched her cheeks at the question. The necklace pulsed again, as if objecting to even this indirect reference to her connection with Cassius. With halting starts and occasional pauses to collect herself, Lyra recounted the day's discoveries, the archives, the ancestral journal, the seance in the Ember Sanctuary, and the warning about Alek's intentions for the midnight procession. She described the Crown of Cinders' original purpose and its subsequent dismantling, the three components Alek had somehow recovered, and his apparent plan to use her ancestral connections to compensate for the missing elements. Throughout her explanation, the necklace continued its campaign of physical distraction, sending waves of heat through her body at irregular intervals that made maintaining her train of thought increasingly difficult. It was like trying to conduct a serious conversation while periodically being doused with both ice water and liquid fire, her body and mind at war with each other. Zara listened with growing horror, her usual animated expressions sobering into something harder and more focused as the full scope of the situation became clear.
So the engagement was never about political alliance,
she concluded grimly.
It was about accessing your family's ancestral magic for this corrupted crown working.
Not entirely,
Lyra qualified, wiping away the last traces of tears as her analytical mind reasserted itself.
The political advantages are real enough. The Embersong Brightforge union strengthens the Fire Guild's position considerably. Alek is calculating enough to ensure his schemes serve multiple purposes.
All the more reason to fear him,
Zara muttered.
Someone who can weave personal ambition into political advantage while maintaining a charming facade.
She shuddered visibly.
And my family thought he was such a catch for you.
Despite everything, that drew a watery laugh from Lyra.
He is, on paper, powerful, politically connected, conventionally handsome.
And secretly using forbidden enchantments to manipulate you into a magical working that could potentially corrupt ancestral fire magic.
Zara finished dryly.
Quite the matrimonial prospect.
The necklace flared particularly hot at this direct criticism, sending a wave of sensation through Lyra so intense she gasped, clutching the edge of her chair. Zara's eyes widened.
That bad?
Worse when certain topics arise.
Lyra confirmed, forcing steady breaths until the sensation subsided.
Particularly direct criticism of Alek
Or? Zara prompted when she didn't continue.
Or thoughts of Cassius.
Lyra admitted quietly, unable to meet her friend's gaze.
The connection we established during the séance? It was unlike anything I've experienced. Not just academically fascinating, but...
She struggled to articulate the depth of what had transpired between them.
Complete. As if we discovered parts of magic, of ourselves, that had been artificially separated.
Understanding dawned in Zara's eyes.
The kind of connection marriage ceremonies are supposed to create.
Yes.
Lyra's voice dropped almost to a whisper.
The exact opposite of what this necklace does. Instead of control, there was harmony. Instead of manipulation, there was resonance.
And now you have to go through a ceremonial procession with Alek, pretending to be his willing bride-to-be while he attempts to use you as a conduit for forbidden magic.
Zara summarized, the contrast laid painfully bare.
While wearing an enchanted necklace that punishes thoughts of the man
Lyra cut herself off, shocked by the admission she'd nearly voiced aloud. The necklace seized on even this unspoken recognition, pulsing with vicious heat that made her entire body flush with unwanted sensation. She pressed her palms against her temples, focusing on the spirit shield around her thoughts while waiting for the physical reaction to subside.
The man you what?
Zara asked gently when Lyra could meet her eyes again.
The man who showed me what a true connection feels like.
Lyra answered carefully, less afraid of the admission itself than of the necklace's reaction to hearing it stated explicitly.
How can I marry Alek now, knowing what I know? Feeling what I felt? It would be surrendering to manipulation and control when I've experienced genuine partnership.
Zara reached across to take her hands, squeezing them supportively.
You can't marry him. She agreed firmly, even setting aside your feelings for the spirit seer. Alek's plans for this crown working sound actively dangerous. Your ancestors wouldn't have manifested with warnings if this were merely a personal matter.
But how do I escape it?
Lyra asked, giving voice to the fear that underpinned all her other emotions.
The engagement ceremony is tomorrow. The entire Fire Guild hierarchy will be present. My father has staked his political reputation on this alliance. And this necklace?
She touched it helplessly.
I can't remove it. I can't even explain its true nature without revealing knowledge of forbidden magic. That would compromise my own standing.
One problem at a time,
Zara counseled, her practical nature asserting itself.
Tonight's procession comes first. You said the spirit shield keeps your thoughts clear despite the necklace's influence?
Lyra nodded.
And the connection Cassius and I established provides an additional layer of protection. A separate magical pathway the necklace can't easily access.
Then you can appear to participate in Alek's ceremony while internally resisting whatever magic he's attempting to channel through you.
Zara reasoned.
Meanwhile, I'll position myself near your father during the procession. If I can help him understand what's happening without causing a public scene.
He'd never believe Alek capable of using forbidden enchantments without indisputable proof,
Lyra cautioned.
The political implications would be too significant to act on suspicion alone.
Then we need proof.
Zara determined, her expression sharpening with purpose.
Something even High Councilor Embersong can't dismiss or rationalize away.
The necklace pulsed again, but less aggressively this time, as if it couldn't quite interpret their strategic planning as direct opposition to Alek. Lyra used the momentary reprieve to strengthen her focus, pushing past the physical discomfort to concentrate on immediate necessities.
I need to prepare for the procession,
she said, glancing at the ceremonial robes laid out on her bed. The paired garment designed to complement Alek's, with its subtle crown motifs and symbolism of unified houses.
I can't avoid it without raising immediate alarms.
No,
Zara agreed.
but you can approach it with clear purpose rather than helpless resignation.
She studied Lyra's face intently.
That's what was breaking you, wasn't it? Not just the situation itself, but facing it alone.
The simple observation broke through whatever composure Lyra had managed to rebuild. Fresh tears welled in her eyes, though she blinked them back before they could fall.
I've always handled everything alone.
She admitted, her voice thick with emotion.
Family expectations, guild politics, my own research, all of it carefully managed and controlled. But this?
She gestured helplessly at the necklace, at the ceremonial robes, at the festival lights visible through her window.
This is too much. Too important. Too dangerous to face with only my own resources.
Zara squeezed her hands again.
You're not alone. Not anymore.
She smiled, a fierce expression that held more determination than humor.
You have me. You have your spirit seer, however complicated that connection might be. And you have your own strength, which is considerable, even if you're temporarily overwhelmed.
The simple reassurance acted like a balm on Lyra's raw emotions. She took a deep breath, feeling something settle within her. Not resolution, exactly, but a newfound steadiness amidst the chaos. The breakdown had been necessary. A release of pressure that had been building since Alek first placed the necklace around her throat. Now, even as the enchantment continued its physical assault, she found her center more accessible.
Thank you,
she said quietly,
for coming to find me, for staying, for understanding.
What are friends for, if not helping each other escape magical manipulation and political disaster?
Zara replied with a hint of her usual humor before turning serious again.
Now, let's prepare you for this procession. If you're going to outmaneuver a master manipulator using forbidden enchantments, you need to look absolutely magnificent while doing it.
The practicality of this approach, acknowledging the emotional reality while focusing on immediate action, helped Lyra transition from breakdown to determination. As Zara helped her prepare, selecting accessories for the ceremonial robes, and arranging her flame-red hair in an elegant style that incorporated subtle Embersong family symbols, Lyra found her thoughts clarifying despite the necklace's persistent physical distractions.
I'm going to need to maintain appearances through tonight and into tomorrow,
she said, formulating her strategy aloud as Zara worked.
If we disrupt Alek's plans during the procession, he'll simply adapt them for the engagement ceremony itself. We need to understand exactly what he's attempting before we can effectively counter it.
Which means letting him believe his enchantment is working,
Zara concluded, securing a final hairpin topped with a small amber flame.
Playing the willing bride while gathering evidence of his true intentions.
Precisely.
Lyra studied her reflection in the mirror. Outwardly, the perfect representation of Fire Guild aristocracy. Inwardly, a woman fighting for her autonomy against magical manipulation. The contrast felt strangely appropriate. A visual manifestation of the duality she'd been living since childhood. The public persona versus the private self. The necklace pulsed again, sending another wave of heat through her body that she acknowledged without surrendering to. Each time it happened, she found the experience slightly easier to compartmentalize, not because the sensation diminished, but because her response to it evolved. Like developing a callus from repeated friction, her mind was learning to recognize and categorize the enchantment's effects without being derailed by them.
There,
Zara said, stepping back to assess her work.
Perfect blend of tradition and subtle defiance.
Lyra examined the completed appearance more carefully, noting the clever details Zara had incorporated. Traditional elements positioned in slightly unorthodox arrangements. Family symbols given greater prominence than was customary. Subtle suggestions of independence woven into what appeared, at casual glance, to be perfect conformity.
Hiding rebellion in plain sight.
She observed with genuine appreciation.
A specialty of yours.
I learned from the best.
Zara replied with a grin.
You've been doing it your entire academic career, pursuing forbidden cross-elemental research while maintaining an impeccable reputation as the High Councilor's perfect daughter.
The observation was so accurate that Lyra found herself laughing despite the gravity of their situation.
I suppose I have.
The moment of levity strengthened her resolve. She stood straighter, adjusting the ceremonial robes with newfound purpose.
I can do this,
she said as much to herself as to Zara.
I can play the role they expect while working against Alek's plans from within.
One night of deception, then freedom.
Zara agreed, though both knew the path wouldn't be so straightforward. The engagement ceremony scheduled for tomorrow carried weight beyond personal preference. Political alliances, family obligations, guild expectations, all entangled in what had been presented as a perfect union of powerful magical lineages. The distant sound of ceremonial horns filtered through Lyra's tower windows, the signal that festival participants should begin gathering for the midnight procession. Time had run shorter than they'd realized during their conversation.
I should join the guild officials,
Zara said, adjusting her own festival attire, more elaborate than usual due to her official role on the celebration committee.
Remember, I'll be positioned near your father throughout the procession. If you need to communicate anything urgently...
The signal we used during academy examinations,
Lyra suggested, referring to a subtle hand gesture they had developed years ago to exchange information under the watchful eyes of instructors.
It should be visible even across the procession route.
Perfect.
Zara embraced her quickly, a rare physical demonstration of the friendship usually expressed through practical support and shared understanding.
You are stronger than his enchantments,
she whispered fiercely.
And your connection with the spirit seer proves there are more powerful magics than control.
The necklace flared hotly at this direct challenge, but Lyra barely flinched, her mind increasingly skilled at recognizing and compartmentalizing its effects.
Thank you,
she said simply as they separated.
For everything. After Zara departed, Lyra spent a few moments in silent meditation, a technique borrowed from the spirit texts she had studied secretly, adapted to complement her natural fire affinity. She focused on the connection she had established with Cassius, finding it still present beneath her conscious awareness, a subtle resonance that hummed with potential, ready to be activated when needed. The necklace continued its campaign of physical distraction, but she worked around it rather than against it, acknowledging the sensations without allowing them to dominate her awareness. Like navigating around a physical obstacle rather than trying to remove it, this approach allowed her to maintain focus despite the enchantment's increasing aggression. By the time the second ceremonial horn sounded, the signal for primary participants to take their positions, Lyra had achieved a state of balanced determination that would have impressed even the most disciplined spirit mage. The emotional breakdown had been necessary, a release that allowed her to process the enormity of her situation. Zara's support had been essential, providing perspective and practical assistance when she needed it most. Now, as she prepared to join the procession and face Alek's machinations directly, Lyra found herself drawing strength from unexpected sources. Her ancestors' warnings, Cassius's respectful partnership, Zara's loyal friendship, and most significantly, her own newfound clarity about what she truly wanted and what she refused to accept. The woman who left the tower to join the midnight procession appeared outwardly identical to the one who had entered it earlier. Perfectly attired in ceremonial robes, her bearing aristocratic, her expression appropriately composed for such an important public event. Yet internally the transformation was profound. She had entered in tears, overwhelmed by circumstances beyond her control. She departed with purpose, a plan forming with each step, the very adversity that had nearly broken her now forging her into something stronger. The necklace still encircled her throat. Its enchantment still rippled through her body with distracting heat, but its power over her essence had been irrevocably weakened. As she descended the tower stairs toward the gathering point, where Alek would be waiting to lead the procession at her side, Lyra touched the small crack in the central opal, a physical manifestation of the first flaw in his carefully constructed control. By midnight, when they reached the final ceremonial gate, and he attempted whatever working the incomplete Crown of Cinders required, she would be ready. Not to submit, as he expected. Not to serve as a passive conduit for his ambitions, but to demonstrate that genuine connection, freely offered, mutually respected, created power far greater than anything manipulation and control could ever achieve. The necklace pulsed once more against her fingertips, sending another wave of heat through her body. Lyra acknowledged it calmly, then continued her descent, each step bringing her closer to confrontation, and to the possibility of freedom beyond it.